The scent of freshly brewed coffee was the only warmth left in my life. Every morning, before the city woke, I'd unlock the doors of Velvet Grounds Cafe, breathe in the bittersweet aroma of roasted beans, and pretend that it was enough to keep me standing. 8 hours into my double shift, I'd already lost count of how many cups I'd poured. Espressos for executives, lattes for lowers, cappuccinos for dreamers who still believed in happy endings. I wasn't one of them anymore. Rent was due, the hospital kept calling, and my father's medical bills stacked up higher than the foam on a macchiato. When I looked at my reflection in the espresso machine, I barely recognized the woman staring back tired eyes. Kept nail polish, a name tag that read Lena. Outside, the city groaned awake. Taxi horns, sirens, rain against glass, the kind of rain that seeps into your bones, reminding you how cold life can be when you're fighting it alone. I pressed the portafilter into place, listening to the hiss of steam, the one sound that made sense in my world. Then the doorbell chimed, and silence followed. It wasn't the usual kind of quiet, not the gentle lull between songs or conversations. This one was sharp, electric, the kind that hums in your veins and whispers something's about to happen. 3 men walked in, tailored suits, polished shoes. Not a drop of rain dared touch them. Every eye in the cafe turned, then quickly looked away. The air shifted, heavy with a presence that didn't belong here. Among the smell of pastries and burnt espresso, the one in the center, he didn't just walk in. He arrived. Tall. Mid-30s maybe. Dark hair. Slicked back, but not pretentious. A face carved in sharp lines and quiet command. There was nothing gentle about him. Nothing that invited approach yet. Everything about him demanded attention. He looked around the cafe the way a predator surveys unfamiliar territory calm. Precise. Utterly in control. When his gaze landed on me, the world narrowed to a single heartbeat. Ember ease. Cold and molten at the same time. And for a moment, I forgot to breathe. I dropped my gaze, pretending to focus on the milk frother. But I could feel him watching that steady, measured stare that strips you bare without a word. Sofia, my co-worker, appeared at my side. Lena, she hissed. Table 6. And maybe, don't look up. I nodded, gripping the tray so tightly, my knuckles ached. Their table waited the best one in the house, reserved for the kind of customers who never came. I set down the cups, my voice steadier than I felt. Good morning, gentlemen. What can I get you? The man on the left answered. Espressos. 3. His tone was clipped, professional, like a soldier, reporting orders. But it was the man in the middle, the one whose silence spoke louder than anyone's voice, who stopped me as I turned away. Who makes the coffee here? I froze. My heart sheeped. Slowly. I turned back. I do. I managed. He studied me with those unsettling eyes, the corners of his mouth curving into the faintest suggestion of a smile, the kind that hides secrets behind civility. You make coffee, he said, like someone who understands perfection. It wasn't flirtation, it was assessment, as if he were testing something unseen inside me. And before I could think of a reply, he placed a sleek black card on the table beside his cup. Damien Voss. It read in embossed letters. No title. No company. Just a name heavy enough to silence the air. They finished their drinks in silence, then left, leaving behind a tip that equaled half my paycheck. The door closed. The hum of conversation resumed, but the echo of his voice stayed behind like perfume clinging to the air. Sophia leaned across the counter, once they were gone. That man, she whispered. His name doesn't belong in this neighborhood. I frowned. You know him. Everyone knows him. Or knows of him. Her eyes darted toward the door. Stay far away from that one. Lena. He's the kind of beautiful that ruins lives. I laughed it off. But something inside me had already shifted, a tiny spark buried deep beneath the fatigue and fear. That night, I tried to forget him. I really did. But when I closed my eyes, I saw amber eyes and a quiet smile that felt like a warning and a promise. 2 nights later, the storm came. Rain pounded against the glass like fists, and thunder rolled through the city's bones. I was alone, wiping down the counter, counting tips, and dreaming of sleep when the doorbell chimed again. I didn't look up right away, just called out the same tired line. Sorry. We're closed. But the voice that answered wasn't one I expected. I know. I turned, and there he was. Damien Voss stood in the doorway. Rain dripping from his coat. Shadows following him like loyal pets. He moved closer. Unhurried. Confident. As if he already owned the space. As if he already owned me. My throat went dry. We're closed. I repeated. Softer this time. Because my voice no longer obeyed me. He removed his coat with slow precision, revealing a crisp white shirt. The top buttons undone. I came for the coffee, he said simply. And to see if it was really you who made it taste that way. Lightning flashed behind him, painting the edges of his face in white fire. It should have scared me. Instead, I felt a pulse of heat. I couldn't explain. I can make one more, I said, turning to the machine, grateful for something to do. He followed me. Close enough that I could feel his presence at my back, not touching. But close enough that the air between us trembled. The rhythm of the cafe returned grind. Tamp. Pour. Steam. It was muscle memory now, the one place I felt steady. In control. When I slid the cup toward him, or our fingers brushed, a spark small. Undeniable. He noticed it too. His eyes flicked to mine. The faintest hint of amusement glimmering beneath the calm. He lifted the cup, inhaled, and took a sip. The silence stretched thin between us, until he set it down again. Perfect, he murmured. Just like before. Something in me loosened. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding slipped free. He studied me again. Head tilted slightly. You work too hard, Miss Carter. My name on his lips startled me. How do I make it my business to know the people who interest me? I wanted to step back, to put the counter between us, but curiosity anchored me in place. What do you want from me? I asked. He smiled. Slow and deliberate. A proposition. That word proposition didn't belong in small talk. It belonged in contracts. In deals sealed behind closed doors. I said nothing. And he continued. I'm hosting a private dinner tomorrow evening. Important guests. I'd like you to handle the coffee service. You'll be compensated well. How well? $5,000. The number hit me like a physical thing. That was 3 months of rent. Or a full round of my father's treatment. I should have said no. I should have run. Instead, I heard myself ask, why me? His eyes darkened. But his voice remained calm. Because you make something ordinary taste exceptional. And I don't tolerate anything less than exceptional in my home. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket and set it on the counter. My address. 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. The sound of thunder filled the silence between us. And if I say no, I asked. His smile returned colder this time. You won't. He turned, retrieving his coat, and paused at the door. Do you have a ride home? I blinked. I take the bus. He glanced at the storm outside. then typed something on his phone. My driver will be waiting when you're done here. That's not necessary. I protested. It wasn't an offer, he said quietly. And with that, Damien Voss disappeared into the rain. For a long moment, I just stood there, the echo of his voice mixing with the storm. The scent of coffee and danger heavy in the air. When I finally stepped outside, a black car, idled by the curb. The driver, the same man who had flanked Damien, earlier opened the door without a word. Miss Carter, he said with a polite nod. Mr. Voss asked me to see you home. He hesitated, staring at the dark interior, at the reflection of my own uncertain face in the wet glass. The city lights shimmered through the rain, distorted and beautiful, like a world slightly out of reach. Every instinct told me to walk away. But the thought of that envelope, of what it could mean for my father, pulled me forward. I slid into the back seat. The leather was warm. The air smelled faintly, of cedar and smoke. As the car moved through the rain-soaked streets, I watched the city blur by bright and distant. A world I didn't belong to. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I was being rescued or recruited. Somewhere, deep down, I knew the truth. The moment Damien Voss walked into my cafe, fate had poured me a cup I could never return. And tomorrow night, I would drink it one sip at a time. I told myself I was there to work. Nothing more. Just pour coffee. Pass wine. Collect empty glasses. And leave with enough money to keep my father breathing a little longer. That was the story I rehearsed on the way over. Staring out at the glittering skyline, while the car climbed the hill toward the house that seemed to sit above the city like a throne. Damien's mansion was the kind of beautiful that felt like a warning, sleek glass and steel, draped over old bones. Modern lines. Old-world echoes. If a person could be a place, he would be this polished surfaces, hiding something ancient, relentless, and sharp. I stepped inside and felt the temperature of the room before I noticed the guests. The air was warm with candlelight and expensive perfume. But beneath it ran a current of quiet menace. Men who spoke softly and smiled politely, yet carried storms in their eyes. Politicians, with perfect ties. Investors with rings that flashed like small suns. Women who could slice a room in half with a glance. And then there was him. Damien Voss didn't move so much as bend the air around him. In that tailored suit, he made the room feel both crowded and too small. When he smiled, people leaned closer. When he fell silent, people rearranged themselves. He didn't just command attention, he owned it. I kept my head down, and my tray level. The rules were simple: serve, vanish, repeat. If my hands shook a little when I poured, no one seemed to notice. If my heart skipped when he looked in my direction, I pretended it was the music. Slow jazz woven through conversation like a silk thread. It didn't last. I was crossing the marble floor with a fresh tray of espresso when his voice reached me low. Sure. Familiar in a way that felt dangerous. Miss Carter. I turned because there was no other choice. The world drew its breath and waited. He stood close enough that the light gilded his cheekbones and cast shadows at the hollow of his throat. His tie matched the night outside, and his eyes were the same amber as the candle flames. You hold a room without saying a word, he said. Do you know that I hold a tray? I answered, trying for dry and landing somewhere near breathless. That's all. He smiled. You don't rattle. Not easily. I admire that. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. The way a chess player studies a move before deciding whether to commit. Something inside me pulled taut, then steadied. If he was testing me, he would find me more stubborn than I looked. I presented the espresso. He didn't take his eyes off me. He lifted the cup without looking, tasted it, and set it back on the saucer, with a soft, deliberate sound that made the moment feel sealed. Perfect, he said. Again. I told myself to walk away. He prevented that with a look. After the guests leave, he murmured. So low it felt like a secret. Join me in the study. Just for a few minutes. Just a few minutes. The most dangerous words in the world. The night stretched. Toasts were made. Promises implied. Deals threaded through laughter. I moved among them like a ghost. Invisible by design. Watching men pretend that power was simply something you could wear. Every now and then I'd feel his gaze on me intent. Unhurried. Deliberate. It wasn't possessive. It was interested. Curious. As if I were an answer to a question he hadn't realized he was asking, when the last guest took their coat, and the staff began to stack plates that cost more than my month's rent. I followed the hallway that swallowed footsteps. The house quieted around me. Settling into its bones, I reached a door left slightly ajar, and the scent of smoke and oak drifted out to meet me. Come in, he said. Before I knocked, his study was all dark wood and low light. A place built for secrets. Shelves of leather spines. A fire that didn't crackle so much as breathe. The city lay beyond the glass. A constellation of lives too far away to touch. He poured 2 drinks without asking, then handed me one, like it was something inevitable. I don't usually. I started. Tonight. You do, he said gently. Not a command. An invitation that felt like a promise to catch me if I fell. The first sip was warm and smoky. A lesson in patience. I sat. He didn't. Not at first. He circled the desk, glanced down at a file he didn't need, then joined me on the low sofa, near the fire, as if he'd decided the desk put us on the wrong sides of something. For a while we did the polite thing: weather, music, the cafe. He asked about the beans I preferred. As though I were equal parts craft and mystery. He listened the way real listeners do. Not to answer, but to understand. Then he asked the question that opened a door inside me. If money wasn't a problem, he said softly, what would you do with your life? It was such a simple sentence. Such a complicated answer. I stared into the amber in my glass and saw everything I wanted try to surface and sink again. I'd finish school, I said. I'd take care of my father without choosing between groceries and the pharmacy. I'd sleep without waking up counting what I don't have. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, less polished steel. More something I couldn't name. Tell me what you studied. Literature, I said, and braced for the indulgent smile I'd learnt to expect when I told people I valued words over numbers. It didn't come. His mouth tilted. Almost private. Of course. I set the glass down. The room felt warmer. Or maybe that was just me. What do you want from me? I asked. Because letting him choreograph a waltz around the truth felt like agreeing to dance blindfolded. Honesty, he said first. Then, after a heartbeat. And time. Time for what he considered me. To build something. Structure. Routine. Efficiency. I have a life that moves too quickly and too carelessly. I need someone who notices the details and cares how the machine runs. A job, I said. Because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to name. A job, he echoed. Personal assistant. If we need a title. Not in name only. In practice. He leaned forward. Forearms on his knees. Hands loose. Open. The pose of a man who knows he can close them any time. 15,000 a month. he said. The number didn't feel real in my head. Full medical coverage. Not just yours. Your father's. Transportation. Housing. If you prefer to be closer to the office. Discretion. Of course. On both sides, my breath left me in a small, inelegant sound I couldn't contain. That's not a job. I whispered. That's a solution. He supplied. You don't have to take it. But you expect me to. I expect you to consider it. He stood. Not in dismissal. But to retrieve something from the desk drawer. When he sat again, he slid an envelope across the table. It stopped by my fingertips, like it had always meant to arrive there. What's in it? I asked. Though I already knew. Terms. He said. A map. Of sorts. Maps show exits. I said. Do yours. That brought the smallest flash of amusement to his eyes. Of course. I'm not in the habit of trapping people. Miss Carter. No, I asked. Thinking of the driver waiting when I hadn't asked. The way fate had felt prearranged, since the moment he walked into my cafe. No. He repeated. But I make it difficult to want to leave. The honesty disarmed me more than any denial could have. I didn't touch the envelope. If I did, it would feel like accepting something I couldn't return. I wanted to argue, to point out that nothing about this sounded normal. That people didn't offer lifelines without strings, braided into the rope. But the part of me that negotiated budgets and counted pills and learned how much dignity costs wouldn't let me throw away what looked like rescue. Why me? I asked finally. Really? He didn't look away. Because you do ordinary things exceptionally well. Because you don't flinch. Because you're tired and still kind. Because you look at a room and see what it needs. And what do you need, order? He said. A little too fast. Then, lower. And someone who tells me the truth. The fire made a soft sound. Like a breath drawn and held. I thought about my father asleep in a too-bright room. Machines ticking numbers that were supposed to comfort. I thought about rent due and hours added, and the way my hands never seemed to stop shaking, until I stood in front of an espresso machine, and made something that tasted like control. I reached for the envelope, and felt the edges press into my palm. You don't have to decide tonight, he said, and there was something in his tone that landed near mercy. Take the weekend. Breathe. Do the math. What if my answer is no? Then I'll find another solution for my problems. He said simply, and you will keep making perfect coffee. And I will keep drinking it. And we will pretend the world is kinder than it is. He stood. And the moment stood with him. The conversation, like the drink, was finished. He walked me to the foyer. The house had quieted to a cathedral hush. The city's glitter caught in the glass, like a constellation pinned for display. He helped me into my coat, as if this were a ritual we'd practiced. At the door, he paused. Get home safe, he said. Text the number on the card when you arrive, so I don't wonder. You wonder. His eyes warmed by a degree I felt rather than saw, against my better judgment. Outside, the night tasted like rain and possibility. In the car, I held the envelope in my lap like it might burn a hole through the fabric. I told myself to wait until morning to open it. I made it as far as my kitchen table. The pages were crisp. The language precise. Salary. Coverage. Expectations. Boundaries I could accept. Revise. Refuse. It was civilized. It was thoughtful. It was a door I could walk through and never be the same again. I didn't sleep. Morning arrived in pale grey light. And I packed the questions I couldn't answer into a bag I carried to the hospital. My father smiled when he saw me. That soft, brave smile that made me feel 5 years old and fierce at the same time. We talked about small things. Weather. The neighbor's dog. The soup he didn't like. I didn't mention the envelope at the bottom of my bag. I thought I had time to decide what kind of daughter I wanted to be. The call came after lunch. A nurse with careful eyes, and a voice trained for good news and bad. Ems. Carter. She said. We've received authorization to transfer your father to a private facility for a new round of treatment. An anonymous donor has arranged coverage. The transfer can happen as early as tomorrow. I stood so fast. The chair scraped the floor. The world tilted and then steadied. I knew Anonymous when it wore a name. I thanked her. I nodded. I smiled with my mouth and felt nothing in my hands. When I looked at my father, he was already relieved in that way that makes grown children ache, hope expanding into spaces that had been empty too long. Back in the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed like bees. I pulled out my phone with fingers that wouldn't quite behave. One new message. No name. No need. Your father's future is secure. Come to dinner. We have much to discuss. I stared at the words until they blurred, until they sharpened again, until they sounded like what they were not a command. Not exactly something stronger than a suggestion and softer than a threat. I typed nothing. I put the phone away. I pressed my palm to my chest until my heartbeat remembered the right rhythm. Outside. The sky opened. Rain began again. Pulite, at first. Then insistently true. Somewhere across the city. A man in a dark suit poured a drink he didn't need and waited for an answer I didn't yet know how to give. I told myself I was still free to choose. The truth was simpler and harder. Some choices choose you. And when they do, the only thing left is to decide who you're going to be inside them. That night, I folded the envelope shut, slid it back into my bag, and let the rain tell me what I already knew. I was going to dinner. I told myself I went to dinner for answers. The truth was less noble. I went because I couldn't stay away. He was already waiting when I arrived, composed, immaculate, as if self-control were a language he'd invented. The table was set for two. The city, glimmering beyond the glass, like a promise I couldn't afford to keep. He poured wine without asking. The same way he asked for nothing, and still filled the room with expectation. I got your message, I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. You had no right to control my life. Silence followed the words like thunder after lightning. He studied me as if I were a page. He hadn't decided whether to turn or memorize. I don't control you, Lena, he said at last. Calm as snowfall. I protect what I value. The sentence found its mark and stayed there. Something inside me wavered and caught fire at the same time. Anger and relief, fury and the terrible comfort of being chosen. I wanted to throw the feeling back at him. I wanted to hold it with both hands. You went behind my back. You made choices for me. I made choices for your father when the clock was ticking, he said. Softer now. For once. I didn't negotiate with time and lose. I should have left. I should have made space between us big enough to breathe. Instead, the space collapsed. The argument dissolved into something raw. My pulse in my throat. His name like a taste I already knew. We were close enough to share the same breath. Don't. I warned. I wasn't sure if I meant him or myself. He hesitated. And then he didn't. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It wasn't careful. It was the breaking point, masquerading as an answer. A surrender I had been holding back since the first time he stepped through my door and made the sound in the room go quiet. His hand cupped my face with a tenderness that felt like a secret. And when I kissed him back, the last of my rules fell away like paper in rain. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing as if we'd run a long way and only just stopped. The city. The house. the future. They all blurred to the edge of the frame. Only him. Only me. Only the truth we'd been circling, like it might vanish if we named it. I don't know what this is, I said. And it was almost a prayer. It's inevitable, he answered. That's all it needs to be. We didn't get to test inevitability that night. The gala was a ballroom of glass and white light. The kind of place where people practiced being immortal with champagne and promises. I was there to keep him organize names. Faces. A map of alliances drawn in my head with neat lines. He wore the tuxedo like a uniform and moved through the room as if it was simply a different kind of battlefield. When his phone vibrated, I felt the shift before I saw his eyes darken. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. He scanned the exits. He found Marco. His palm pressed against the small of my back. Lightly. The way you might hold a fragile thing you intend to keep intact. Stay close, he said. Close lasted 3 minutes. The first shot didn't sound like the movies. It was smaller. Meaner, an insult that turned the air to glass. People screamed on instinct. Then froze. Then scattered. Damien moved in the opposite direction of every instinct in the room. He put himself between the noise and me. A wall of muscle and intention. Marco, he said. And the name came out as an order. Get her out. I'm not leaving you. I said. Because I meant it. Because my mouth outran my mind when it came to him. This is not the moment for debate. Lena. Another shot. Closer. I could smell smoke that wasn't from the lighting. Marco's hand found my arm with a grip that promised bruises and safety in equal measure. Go. Damien told him. And then to me. Softer than he had any right to sound in the middle of chaos. Please. I held his eyes for a heartbeat that felt like a lifetime's worth of things we hadn't said. Then let Marco pull me into a service corridor that smelled like bleach and panic. We moved fast. Every door was a new room. Every corner a prayer. I didn't cry because there wasn't time. I didn't breathe because it felt like a betrayal. In the car, the city didn't glitter anymore. It watched. The ride stretched into something elastic and cruel. The house waited with its lights like sentries. I stood in my room staring at a wall that didn't answer my questions, and pressed my palms to my chest, like I could keep my heart from breaking itself. Hours are longer when they're made of fear. When the engines finally sounded in the driveway, I ran. Not graceful. Not quiet. Just the kind of movement you do when hope is a thing with weight, and you suddenly remember how to carry it. He stepped from the SUV under a sky that hadn't decided if it wanted to be night or morning. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. A dark stain dried in a pattern that told a story I didn't want to read. A cut at his brow. Blood on his knuckles. Alive. The word knocked me off balance. You should be asleep, he said softly. Which was the kind of thing men say when they're bleeding, and trying not to scare you. You're hurt. Not badly. He lied. Because the truth would have kept me from touching him the way I needed to prove he was real. I reached for him anyway. Fingertips grazing the uninjured side of his face. The tremor I'd been fighting all night won and ran through me like a current. I can't live in your world, I said. And the sentence came out, like the confession, at the end of a long trial. I can't wake up every day and wonder if the person I love comes home. The word hung between us, love defiant and undeniable. Something in his expression cracked. Not a lot. Just enough to let a light through. He took my hand and pressed it to his chest, over the steady drum that had nearly stopped for me. Then let me build a world where you're safe. He said. Not a promise, a vow. You can't change gravity. Damien. No. He agreed. But I can teach it your name. The argument should have continued. It should have found all its logical points, and laid them out like stones across a river. Instead, The logic dissolved. What remained was a circle of truth. We could no longer step around. I was already in it. He was already holding it like something he had no intention of setting down. "Say you'll stay," he said. But it wasn't a command. I didn't answer with words. I reached up and kissed him. And it wasn't like the first kiss that had broken our rules. It was the one that made new ones. His hand at the back of my neck, mine fisted in the fabric at his shoulder. The taste of ash, and salt, and relief. The life we didn't know how to navigate yet. Drawing its first, necessary breath. The rest unfolded quietly. Deliberately. As if we were both afraid to startle the moment. No grand declarations. No grand gestures. Just the uncomplicated truth of two people who had finally stopped pretending. I remember the warmth of his skin. The way his breath steadied against my neck. The soft catch in his throat. When I traced the scar at his ribs. I remember feeling something settle in my chest that had been storm for as long as I could remember. I remember the world outside, and how it got small enough to fit into the room with us, and still make sense, after. We lay with the window open, to a dawn that had the good sense to arrive gently. He didn't speak for a long time. Neither did I. We didn't need to. His hand made slow circles at my back like a promise, in a language only we understood. "What happens now?" I asked finally. "Me voice almost asleep. Now I keep you," he said. "Not as a possession. As a home? People don't keep homes." I murmured. "Then I'll live in you," he said. And I didn't laugh, because he meant it, and I understood. The days that followed didn't soften the world. They sharpened us. He delegated. What could be delegated? He tripled security, without turning the house into a prison. I went to the hospital, and watched my father recover. Parts of himself illness had stolen. We learned how to argue without breaking things that couldn't be repaired. We learned how to be quiet together. We learned how to reach for each other first. 6 months later. Summer had found the garden. The air was honeyed and generous. The light did that soft thing it does when it likes the people it falls on. My father laughed at something Marco said near the grill. The kind of laughter that makes you believe in doctors and luck. I leaned against the terrace rail and let the warmth crown me. Some might call it madness. I said in the kind of voice you use when you're alone with your thoughts and the person who knows them already. To love a man like him, maybe they're right. Another version of me would have added, this one didn't. This one knew better. I felt him before I heard him, the shift in the air. The certainty that had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. He slid his arms around my waist and rested his chin on my shoulder, like we'd practiced it enough to get it perfect. "In your darkness?" I whispered. I found my light. He didn't argue. He never argued with metaphors, unless they lied. We watched my father cross the lawn toward us. The grass bending, and then standing back up. Forgiving. As if that were its only job. I thought about everything it had taken to arrive at a moment. This simple. I thought about the debt people imagine they owe to the past and how, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pay the future instead. He pressed a kiss to the place where my shoulder met my neck. And the world, obedient, clicked into place. He was danger wrapped in devotion, and I was the fool who called it love. Except fools don't choose. Fools fall. I chose. We both did. Over and over. Until choice became a path, and the path became a life. As the sun slid down the sky and turned the city to amber, I held the hand that had built empires and rested the weight of my heart in it without apology. He held it like it was the only thing that had ever made him careful. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was faith. Maybe those words are just two sides of the same coin, when you spend them on someone who makes the world both wider and more precise. All I know is this: the cage we feared was never the house or the guards or the headlines. It was the fear of being seen and loved anyway. We broke that lock together. My father called to us. His voice easy, ordinary, whole. We turned, laced fingers, walked toward the future with the kind of calm that comes after storms. We weren't cured of the world. We were committed to it on our terms. If there's a moral, I don't know it. If there's a warning, I ignored it. If there's an ending, it isn't this. But if there's a line to leave you with, one truth that held even when everything else changed, it's this. He was danger, wrapped in devotion. And I was the fool who called it love. The city breathed out. The light held. We didn't look back. He was danger, wrapped in devotion. And I was the fool who called it love. Soft pause. Gentle music swells. If this story found a place in your heart, don't forget to like this video. It helps more dreamers and dark romantics find their way here. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Tales of love, power, and the beautiful kind of danger that changes everything. And tell me in the comments, would you walk away from a love like Damien's? Or would you stay, even knowing the cost? Share this story with someone who believes that, even in darkness, love can still be light. Thank you for watching. Until next time.